Hello, School Transportation Nation. It's Tony Corcoran, publisher and president of School Transportation News. We're glad you made it to the STN podcast, brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. And guess what? We've got a great conversation with Amy Rosa, Director of Transportation for Wa-Nee Community Schools in Indiana, with Mr. Ryan Gray, who's with me today. Ryan, welcome, sir.
Hello, Tony. Hello, nation. As always, it's great to be here.
Well, Ryan, we've had some scintillating headlines on the STN website lately. I know we just are coming off School Bus Safety Week. There was a story about scandal in Long Island, New York. We've got First Student launching a V2X solution, vehicle to everything for electric with Con Ed, which is really interesting. Our friend Alex Cook, I know, has been talking to us for a long time about things they've had in the hopper. And when I saw this release, it really got my attention because there was a photo, an aerial shot of school buses with solar panels, and a lot of them. And we've always talked about the potential application of solar on the roof of school buses. But with the challenge that, is there a separate system that is managing the electrical input that's coming in? But now with the advent of all the electric school buses out there, the battery management system can handle all of it. And that is a very intriguing concept. And they've taken concept to reality now at First Student and launched this new division or new product called First Charge. So I thought, wow, man, this is super cool, Ryan. Talk about technology evolving from what we were just kind of talking about. Who would have thought this was even possible? And now here it is.
The First Charge you mentioned, we've known about it for several years now. That was the reason we selected Alex Cook to be our inaugural Innovator of the Year from a contractor standpoint back in 2022. And really, we awarded him that for developing the solution with his team, but we really hadn't seen that out on the market until just recently. They announced it about a month or so ago. We did a webinar over the summer with First Student where they talked about it. Really innovative in terms of not needing to trench in parking lots. That's a big issue for a lot of school districts. A lot of folks I've talked to, I know you've talked to as well, Tony, the infrastructure that's needed for deploying and implementing electric school bus fleet. That's a lot to handle just in and of itself. You add the construction element to school districts. Many school districts around the nation, they don't have infinite land to carve up for new parking lots and new facilities. They have what they have. You look at some inner city areas, New York City, for example, that they have a parking lot and they have buildings next to it. They have businesses. You need to have a solution that's scalable. And that's really what this First Charge solution is, where basically these shipping containers have everything you need to set up a charging depot above ground. So that's really cool. And now seeing the vehicle to everything, or V2X element that's being brought to this with those solar panels on the top of school buses. Now, these are 12 school buses that operate out of a First Student yard in Brooklyn, New York. So speaking about, New York City and how there's, a need for implementing these things at scale, but with limited space. And this is a great launch pad for them. So, like you said, Tony, we've talked for decades now about what better place to put these solar panels in the roof of school buses. And granted, you can't charge, at least yet, a school bus entirely from solar. It's an element of it, but it's a rather small element, still really requiring the charging from the grid. But definitely, when you're looking at scalability, you're looking at vehicle to everything. You're looking at making school buses rolling remote battery depots, really, to go ahead and put energy back into classrooms, back into the transportation buildings. In a time of an emergency, we've talked about using electric school buses to power up the grid when there's a tornado or a hurricane. We've seen several hurricanes, obviously, recently, very deadly ones, very destructive ones. So it's showing where things are going, where they can go. So it is definitely, like you said, Tony, pretty cool. And we will see how this demonstration project rolls out here in the coming months and years.
Yeah, and speaking with Alex Cook, Alex is the chief engineer at First Student, for those of you that didn't know that out there in school transportation land. And Alex and I spoke the other day, and my big concern too is if we see a deceleration in funding in the future, does he necessarily foresee that impacting the market or the appetite? And he seemed to believe that from a regulatory standpoint, that the CARB regs that have been adopted. How many states is it, Ryan, that adopt CARB?
I believe it's about 11 or 12.
Okay. So,
but with that said, I saw recently Governor Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, they actually made a decision not to follow this advanced clean fleets rule that you're mentioning, California Air Resources Board. They really launched much of the regulations, or regulatory landscape for emissions in vehicles that EPA really has then taken and used as a blueprint for what they're doing nationally and federally. But of those states, a lot of these states, like you said, had signed on to iterations of what CARB has been doing in Virginia. So what Governor Youngkin said recently was, hey, we're not going to follow this electric mandate of 2035. He was referring to a previous law that was signed that said Virginia would follow CARB's emission regulations, but for a previous iteration. So looking at emissions and, from, limiting the amount of emissions coming from diesel engines and whatnot, gasoline engines. But he said, hey, wait, time out. This law was before CARB came out with their advanced clean fleets rule and saying, we're not going to follow this. So there is some pushback, and obviously we're in an election year. And as we've been talking about, there's a lot that needs to be figured out here in the next week or so with the election staring us in the face. Who's going to win? Both candidates have a different pathway going forward, especially when it comes to electric vehicles. But absolutely, this still is in play in a lot of states. We've seen it delayed in several states because of what we're looking at from the production standpoint, right? We've talked a lot about these engine manufacturers. They're playing catch up. I think they're going to meet the regulations. I know we've heard from Cummins that they're going to meet what EPA has put into place for 2027 with their diesel emissions. There's going to be diesel in the marketplace, but we've seen they're not going forward with propane. So a lot of the engine manufacturers have been working with CARB, and there's been a lot of workshops and a lot of talking and meeting between those entities to figure out how are they going to meet these regulations. So we've seen states press pause. Essentially, Oregon did it last year, where they said we can't require our fleet, school bus or otherwise, we can't hold their feet to the fire on this thing because there's just not the selection out there. There's not the availability of engines and vehicles to meet these mandates. So they paused it by a year. So that is definitely at play as well. But to your point, I think that in a lot of other areas, the train's already left the station on electric, and right now it's still a proving ground, though, especially for school bus. So when we see news like what First Student's doing, largest school bus operator in North America, right, and they've said that within the next 7 or 8 years or so, 35,000 school buses are going to be electric. They only have about 2,000 right now, so they've definitely got their work cut out for them. And if First Student has their work cut out for them, obviously the rest of the industry does. But still, it's very cool to see what's possible or what could potentially happen in terms of electric school buses, battery, solar, not simply vehicle to grid or V2G, but vehicle to everything, plugging those school bus batteries back into the grid, expanding the capacity, and really helping communities in summer months, in times of emergency. School buses, again, showing their worth.
Yeah, and I said we'll see what happens in the election, because that is not far away. It is like weeks away. So we'll see where the cards fall. And also, as we've talked about, local elections matter, guys. So get out there and vote. Look at your local propositions. Look at the things that affect you and your community. Definitely very important to look at the state level things, because that all impacts you.
And certainly with the elections too, look at who your state representatives are going to be in Congress, because a lot of the conversation is and has been about former President Trump and his policies and what he says, and Vice President Harris and what her positions are. But so much hinges on Congress, and that can't be forgotten. So pay attention to the folks who are running for the House of Representatives, who are running for the Senate, because ultimately many of these laws, these regulations, these legislation will come before them. And as we've seen, Congress has become pretty backed up, we'll say, over the last decade or so. And so, just trying to keep our government funded, seems to be this annual exercise and these continuing resolutions and whatnot. But when we're looking at legislation, certainly Congress, we need to make sure that Congress is functioning properly, because they're the ones who need to be voting and enacting these bills to get them, or at least get them to the president for signature, whoever that president is. Because as we've seen, Supreme Court has weighed in and said, hey, time out on some of these regulations that are just being, pushed forward in rulemaking without being backed by legislation, or they're superseding what Congress intended. So there's a lot at play there. So don't forget your representatives and your senators in this whole mix.
Yeah, Ryan, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think as the headlines keep rolling in, we had something interesting come in that we got wind of. There was something weird going on in Long Island with a school bus contractor. Long Island, New York, which is what I'm referring to. And we got this document that talked about the FBI, the Secret Service. Usually it's not kind of so scandalous in school transportation. And we have an article online about it, but you want to kind of break it down for the audience? What happened? Why is the FBI and Secret Service looking into this school bus contractor?
Yeah, well, beyond looking into him, John Mensch, who formerly was the owner of East End Bus Lines as a contractor out there on Long Island, actually pleaded guilty in federal court a little bit earlier this year. Actually, I believe it was in September, to check kiting fraud scheme. Now, I was like, I had to look this up and familiarize myself. What is check kiting? So essentially, it's this fraud where his company had gotten basically check writing privileges through their banks, this privileged banking status that allowed for cash advances, essentially. So this was a ruse that Mensch apparently developed, and the feds are looking at his business partners to see what they knew about it. But essentially what he would do was to pay his debts, to pay his salary, to pay the wages for his workers. He didn't have any money. It was basically insolvent, the company was. So he would, for whatever money he needed, he would write a check from one financial institution to himself for X amount of dollars and deposit it in another financial institution. So the institution, we'll call it financial institution A, that he drew the check from, would basically extend however much money, a cash advance, to cover that until the check cleared. And then he would deposit into financial institution B, so he would have money, and then he would pay whatever he needed to pay from that financial institution B account. Meanwhile, before financial institution A, that check would bounce, he would then draw another check, a separate check from financial institution B for X amount of dollars and deposit it into financial institution A to then cover that check. So and he went back and forth, and this spanned from 2017 through most of 2018. So I can only imagine, boy, I am very much the people who know me, my family especially, they know that I like to follow the rules, and so I would never dream of doing this anyways. But I can only imagine
House of cards, Ryan. This is a house of cards.
The anxiety,
ready to fall, right?
I mean, I would be freaking out. I mean, I would be a nervous wreck trying to pull this off, once, much less over 2 years. So as I mentioned, Mensch, he pleaded guilty. He's facing up to 5 years in federal prison. I think that there's a pretty healthy fine there as well, where he's going to have to repay the money. And this is going into to nearly $10 million that he drained to keep his company afloat. And, who knows? I haven't seen anything else. I don't know if he profited personally from this as well. But like I mentioned, the feds are all over this. They are now looking at his business partners to see what they know. And again, just as it's reported in the article on stnonline.com, high wire act of deception. And I think that is a apropos description for what this check kiting scheme did.
Yeah, really interesting, Ryan. Little true crime in school transportation. You feel bad for the community this impacted, the kids, the employees. It has this halo effect that these folks did not know what was going on, and now it hits hard. And frankly, any of this kind of shenanigans or misdoings, it looks bad on the school bus industry. It starts to call into question, is this happening other places? Mm-hmm. It just gives a very bad reputation. And I'm sure the New York State School Bus Contractors Association is keeping a close eye on this, because it is a big deal in their community, because it really puts a big shadow over their businesses. And it's not fair that someone did this, and clearly he was so brazen to do it over this period of time and to defraud financial institutions. 5 years sounds like a light sentence to me, but I guess we'll let the courts decide and follow the story. But it's definitely one we haven't seen in a really long time. This is kind of one of those outliers that you don't see it come along very often.
Not this elaborate anyways. I mean, we certainly have seen several cases over the years of fraud in the school bus industry, whether they be from a contractor, school districts. Yep. There were some Miami school bus employees that arrested for insurance fraud several years ago. The Dallas County Schools, that now defunct bribery organization in the Dallas area.
We saw some embezzlement too.
There was some federal wire fraud going there. We've seen this happen in, a lot of different districts, district employees, purchasing agents there was an incident that happened about a year or two ago where a purchasing agent was setting up shell companies with their family members as the CEOs, and they were getting them on the district invoicing, so that the monthly they were paying these shell companies for nothing, basically. And that was an elaborate scheme. So yes, unfortunately, these things happen. It gives the school bus industry a black eye, but there's so much more good out there going on with school buses. Great segue, Tony. We just wrapped up National School Bus Safety Week and had a lot of great stories come our way. We always hit up our readers to send us videos, photos, write-ups of their celebrations, and just at a glance, a couple dozen that we received from Texas, Georgia, Nevada, Florida, South Carolina, Minnesota. There was a great video that St. Paul Public Schools there in the greater Minneapolis, St. Paul area there in Minnesota did with two of their longtime school bus drivers, basically out of a day in the life. They wake up at 5 in the morning, and all you folks out there in school transportation nation land, that full well. That's what being a school bus driver, being a student transporter is all about. You're up before dawn to make sure that the roads are passable, especially now here we're well into fall, and I think the cold weather hasn't really hit many of the areas of the U.S. quite yet, but we all know it's coming. And school bus drivers, come rain or shine, it's like the post office, right? They're out there no matter the sleet or snow. They're out there. The kids need to get to school. We need to make sure that the community is safe and ready for these yellow buses to roll. So hats off to everybody out there. We have tons of stuff on social media. We have a couple great articles up online. We talked, I believe, a little bit about previously a couple of student transporters in Northern California who went through how they've developed National School Bus Safety Week as almost really a rolling resolution with their county board of supervisors, and how they're extending the olive branch to other districts and working with the California Highway Patrol. And then last week, we actually talked about a school bus driver who wrote a children's book to quell the anxieties of one of their riders. So there was a 7-year-old girl back in, we're looking at Long Island again, back in New York, Tony, where there was a 7-year-old who developed this anxiety, this fear of riding the school bus, because she would watch her older sister, and she just got scared and she just couldn't handle it. So the school bus driver noticed this and wrote a children's book about it. And now the child is a couple of years later, she's 9 years old. She rides the school bus and has developed a great relationship with the school bus driver. And the school bus driver, Margaret Hall, her book is "Why Does My Heart Go Thump When I See the Bus?" So again, you can go to stnonline.com to find out more about that. There will be some information on how you can find that book, but she's sold thousands of them. And it's really, another example of school bus drivers, the impact they make on not only the lives of the children and the parents, but on the industry, to really shine a positive light on what is most important amid all the stuff we're talking about with electric school buses, and will there be funding, and the driver shortage, and this crime being perpetrated by this bus company owner. When it comes down to it, this is a service that's for the benefit of millions of students every day across the nation, a lot of whom would not even be able to get to school if it wasn't for the school bus. So such a great story showing the power that school bus drivers have to really bring positivity to light.
Yeah, Ryan, I agree. It's been great to see the industry outreach on social media. And I think, we were working with Jeff Castle from the School Bus Safety Company to get the word out on his free safety training program, because really, Jeff and I always say it's great to have this School Bus Safety Week, but what do we really do with it? How are we making an impact on actual student safety? It's good to create reminders within your community, and that's really what people do. But how are we as an industry taking action to increase the safety of students, right? And Jeff's always argued for increased use of stop arm, extended stop arm, crossing gates. I know we had a very in-depth conversation a few episodes about, should school buses have crossing gates mandated? And we discussed that in detail, but he saw in his research that something as simple and low tech as a crossing gate saves a lot of lives. And these are small tweaks we can make as an industry. And I know a lot of the research that STN does, we look at our advertisers, we look at equipment. In a recent study, safety again, the technologies that address safety are generally the highest technologies that people are most interested in. So I know optimization and efficiency and budget always drives decisions, but it seems that the appetite for safety technologies is still at the highest levels, Ryan. So I would continue to challenge our listeners to invest and research different safety technologies that are out there. Look how you can implement them. Fatalities, sometimes it happens, but we're doing our best as an industry to try to mitigate that and use tech, use training to be able to elevate. So take advantage of that free training program from Jeff Castle at School Bus Safety Company, as well as a lot of the other technologies that are out there. If you don't have that deployed on your fleet, give it a second look. Take a look at it. See, hey, maybe this could save a child's life, and that's a really big thing for us. So definitely want to get out there. So before we transition to our interview with Amy Rosa, we got a quick message. Hey guys, what do software, hardware, and safety have in common? One word: TransFinder. At the STN EXPO in Reno, TransFinder won 3 Innovation Choice Awards, voted on by STN EXPO attendees for best software, best hardware, best safety technology. TransFinder's Route Finder plus routing solution and apps, Stop Finder and Wayfinder, are well known in the industry. Not everyone realizes TransFinder provides hardware like card readers, tablets, and mounts. And as for safety, Patrol Finder for schools is TransFinder's latest solution designed to make buses and campuses safer. TransFinder's president and CEO, Antonio Civitella, said the recognition means so much because it's voted on by STN EXPO attendees. Civitella said, "We know a lot is riding on TransFinder because a lot is riding on those yellow buses that travel through our communities. TransFinder must continue to innovate as more is being expected of transportation departments from district leadership as well as parents." Learn more at transfinder.com. That's transfinder.com. So before Ryan kicks off the interview with Amy, I want to remind everybody about the TSD conference in Frisco, Texas, November 7th through the 12th. It is right around the corner, guys. We're really excited to host the school transportation industry and have the ultimate in special needs training. If you want to join us, there's still time. Go on the tsdconference.com website, register today. You can also drop in and see us. We'll register you on site. We got a jam-packed schedule of events, everything that you need to be the most successful special needs transporter in school transportation. Guys, it is going to be outstanding. We've got a great lineup for you, so don't hesitate. Please sign up today and be part of something special with this. All right, it's Ryan and the interview with Amy Rosa.
All right, welcome back. We now want to welcome to our School Transportation Nation podcast stage, Amy Rosa, the Director of Transportation for Wa-Nee Community School District in Indiana. Amy, it's so good to see you today.
Hi, Ryan. Good to see you again, too.
On the video, her desk looks immaculate. I was telling her. She said they just recently moved into a new facility, so I know that's becoming a more common occurrence across the nation. Districts getting new digs. Maybe it's just newer in the move-in. It hasn't gotten cluttered yet. But I told her I didn't want to show her my desk. But Amy, a good friend of STN, spoken several times at our conferences, notably when we had STN EXPO East in Indianapolis. So Wa-Nee is in that Indianapolis area. Amy, tell us a little bit about your district, your community.
Thanks, Ryan. We are in northern Indiana, actually, about 2 hours from Indy, but we're still Indianapolis. We're
closer to Indianapolis than I am, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're still in that triangle of Detroit and Chicago, so we have lots of good opportunities for fun. We're a rural community. We serve 2 different towns, cities, about 247 square miles. 35 buses on the road every day, 3,000 students. So a lot of Amish buggies to dodge, along with our construction and all kinds of other things everybody else deals with.
You got to get those buggies. They're going to paint them yellow.
There you go.
with the rub rails and everything. So you mentioned 3,000 students transported.
Yes.
How many? What's the split between general ed and special ed?
So of those 35, we're running 3 special ed every day, plus a preschool bus. So minimal special ed. We do work really hard on integrating into general ed
Okay.
routes as much as we can.
And how long have you been at Wa-Nee, and what's your background in student transportation?
So I have a split story at Wa-Nee. I actually started in finance and banking when I was very young, but then found quickly that I wanted to spend more time with my children. So I saw an ad in the paper and thought bus driving would be fun. So I obtained a CDL around the 97, 98 range, drove for Wa-Nee Community Schools for a few years before I moved away to Ohio, did some work in higher education and administration there, support, and then found my way back to Northern Indiana and worked in the school with special ed for a year. Ended up noting a position open as the assistant director here at Wa-Nee. Applied for that job, obtained it, worked for a year side by side with a director, and then he moved on. And so that was back in 2006. So I've been here in the director's position ever since.
Right on. Well, you're doing a great job out there, as evidenced by a top team award that Wa-Nee won at STN EXPO West out in Reno, Nevada in July. That is a program developed by TransFinder. And I know that Wa-Nee was represented during a panel, a lunch panel during one of the days where all the awardees or the representatives from the school districts spoke about organization. Really, that's really what this award recognizes. And you, unfortunately, you couldn't be with us, but you had your proxy there.
I did.
But tell us a little bit about your transportation department. You told us about the specifics, your buses and the kids you're routing and whatnot. But this award is based on a survey that employees take. So it's kind of a blind survey. You guys don't see it. TransFinder collects everything, but asks some really detailed questions about everything from pay to culture, professional development opportunities. And you guys obviously scored high enough that you were one of 6 winners. Tell us a little bit about your organization. And has it been smooth sailing this whole time? Is this just, you've gotten recognized? Was there a transformational shift that was necessary? You've been there for a minute, so you've seen where all the bodies are buried. Tell us about the organizational structure and successes you guys have been having there.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say smooth sailing, but the core here is just really, really good people who work really hard, who see the bus driver role as more than a job, more of a ministry. A lot of people relate to that. See the work that we do here. We work as a family together. We're in it together for not only the safety factor of getting kids to and from school, but also just the daily life, people and the things they have going on. And a lot of people totally involved with each other, whether it's through church or school, other organizations. So we see a good, solid foundation there. I inherited some very solid foundation when it comes to benefits, making sure that a bus driver is paid well for the job that they do, honoring the license, how hard it is to get, how hard it is to keep. And so I really enjoyed that we have been able to offer and say, hey, come work as a bus driver. You can make in 4 hours what you can make in another traditional job in 8. That attracted me to the position. That I think has helped keep the ball rolling and keeping our driver shortage at a minimum. And then adding all those other culture features in there too, of just people just kind of taking care of people and loving what they do. Multi-generation bus drivers transporting kids and their kids. A lot of trust in the community of our bus drivers that they're going to do what's right and what's safe. We toe the line pretty tight on some of our safety protocol, and I just think as a whole the group is very cohesive, and that keeps us rolling forward.
Definitely a passion project, this industry. I was going to ask about the driver shortage because, a lot of the folks that I've talked to where they have that culture, that family organization, if you will, they seemed to tend to not have as bad of a shortage anyways as maybe some other districts or some very large districts. You're obviously a smaller rural district, but you said it's helped keep your driver shortage to a minimum. Where do you guys stand here as we're talking in late September with your driver shortage? And then we can talk about your school startup, because as we were recording this, you were about a month in.
Sure. Actually, you probably don't want to hear this, some of you, but I have about 70 names on my drug and alcohol list, so potential drivers subs. And like I said, we've got 35 buses on the road every day. So I have a nice pool of sub drivers. I also instituted in the last few years what we call super subs, but they're basically full-time bus drivers with full-time benefits, guaranteed pay morning and afternoon. I have 4 of those on staff. So we've been able to seamlessly fix problems when it comes to maybe somebody calls in sick or somebody shows up late. We've been able to fix those issues, an engine problem here and there. So the sub driver piece for us, I sometimes am embarrassed to say we don't have a driver shortage. And I'm also knocking on wood, because you never know what comes down the road with retirements. But
Absolutely. I wanted to lean in on what you were talking about with sub drivers and being the full-time staff. And a lot of times, I've spoken with some leaders over the years, not many, but who have advocated, hey, when you have a sub driver, you need to make sure that those people are perhaps trained more than your quote unquote regular school bus driver, because those people need to be, they're thrown in at a moment's notice. They need to really know what they're doing, and not simply think of a sub driver as like, oh, that's like the cover driver who, with that comes the perception anyways, that they're not as trained, or they're newer, more green, and they're there to just,
fill the spot.
we think of substitute teachers, oh, they're going to press play on the VCR. I'm dating myself, VCR, but pressing play on iMovie and just having the movie play to get through the class. But is that how you approach your drivers, and making sure that those folks really know all of the routes and they can step in, and they're not feeling overwhelmed?
We actually spend a lot of time with sub drivers and give them a lot of time. I remember when I started, you were lucky if you got the first 2 stops and maybe the name of a kid. And I had experiences where I was out on the road and the first 2 stops didn't show up. And there I sat at a stop sign, right, left, or straight, like my choice here. Wait till somebody radios wondering where I'm at. So I made a really strong commitment. One, I never want to hear a driver say I didn't know something. So that's a big discussion. But also giving the drivers the ability to jump on board, pay them to train the route ahead of time so that they do feel comfortable, promising them I'm not going to throw them out there as much as I possibly can, tracking what routes they do know and strategically placing them when we have a shortage, maybe moving a veteran driver into that last minute route and putting the sub in a route where they are comfortable. They know the kids, they know the plan, allowing them the opportunity to ride more than once if they have to, pulling video, letting them watch the dash cam. Okay, I might not be able to get to ride on this bus, but at least I can watch the dash cam and see what the stops look like, what the students look like, what it looked like on the map, my right and left turns, providing them with good technology so that we can give them good route sheets, good student information, good medical data so they know their kids going into the route. Honestly, just support. And I would say this district, from top down, from the superintendent, the school board, our principals are amazing when it comes to supporting our bus drivers and making sure our drivers know they're out there alone, but they're not alone. And we've got their back. And I always tell them, I'll support you for as long as I possibly can support you until you do something that I can't support. So just, I think a lot for me is I've been there, I've sat in the seat. I know how nerve-wracking it can be, what the position is like, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and helping to support the drivers and let them feel as they walk in here that they're heard, and also helping to solve some of the problems that have arisen during the route as well.
And with the staff shortage, I like to call it. I mean, we talk the headlines all go to the school bus driver shortage. They're on the front line. They're the ones delivering the kids to and from. But there's certainly shortages elsewhere. We've seen a lot of shortages, similar shortages in terms of numbers from the garage, the mechanics, but just staff in general. So interested to know. It sounds like you're well staffed across the board. But when you're talking about also these full-time drivers who are the subs, how much do you guys do, if at all, on cross training and having different elements to make sure that these folks can get the 8 hours, so that when they're not driving a bus, or if they're that sub driver, but there's no substitute routes needed that day, they're doing what else are they doing? Are they being cross disciplined in dispatch, routing, those kind of things?
Sure. Mhm. Yeah, we spent some time with our subs helping them understand the video playback system very well. So if there's somebody that does walk in the door and the office staff is busy, they might be able to support that. The group that I have now is really good with technology. So and they're younger, so they can jump in and help anybody that might support that as well. I mean, anything down to even, hey, can you make the coffee this morning because we're running like crazy dispatching. They're coming in with some really good, fresh perspectives too. And it's giving them the opportunity to get out in all of those routes and not tattling, but coming back with some safety concerns that I may not have been able to see because I'm not on the bus or I'm not watching the dash cam or the live view all the time. That perspective has been great. And we've tried to create a culture of that open door policy on safety. If you see something, say something is our school safety motto. And we impress that on our subs too. If you're fresh out of training, especially this group of 4 now, if you see something that maybe the driver's gotten lax on or they've fallen behind on some of the safety protocol, for the sake of safety, for the sake of kids, please say something. And it helps our drivers stay sharp too.
You mentioned technology a couple times, and you talked about the video a couple times. What else have you implemented, or are you looking to implement in terms of technology to continue to move that needle, both from a safety standpoint, efficiency? You mentioned just from the standpoint of job satisfaction, where your drivers have the tools that they need and then some to get the job done.
So when I looked at GPS, I waited for a unit that would be all-in-one solution. So I do have a video system that also has live GPS and live view. So that's helped as we've had drivers radio in. We could actually dial in, see what's happening right there, hear conversations, help troubleshoot from dispatch. Other technology we've implemented recently in the last few years, the first light student lights for the illuminated front and back and the stop sign. We retroed the entire fleet of stop signs for more illumination. We're out here in the rural community. Every bus that I could, I retroed that front and back illuminated sign. Actually looking at a new product that just came across my desk because we piloted the first student here in Indiana as well. Looking to pilot, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's an illuminated red light that projects before and after the bus to help just add sort of a stop line to automobiles. And Indiana has approved that. And so there's a few schools here piloting that. And I'm looking to put that on 4 of our buses in the next 2 months.
Similar almost to like a guardian angel where it illuminates the pathway for the students, but it's actually like kind of borders the bus. That's interesting.
Yeah, the guardian angel is like that white path.
Yeah.
This is a red line that projects out in the pavement. I think it's 2 or 3-fold. It gives the students the ability to know where they need to walk and where they need to walk out to, like in front of the bus beyond the cross arm. And also the motorists know, like they can see that this is a school bus. It's unique, hopefully, and there's a stop, but there's also a stop line to give the bus the space that it needs and the path for the student. So I'm interested to see how that plays out with some of our current stop arm violations, and if we can get any reductions, and see what the community thinks about it and give it a shot.
Interesting. Yeah, and it leads me to ask also, in terms of crossing students, Indiana has had some very high profile crossing fatalities over the last several years, where that's from something that happened a little more south of where you guys are several years ago. That horrific striking of 3 siblings that killed them. That's really where I first started hearing about a trend of not crossing students at all. But that there's obviously it's not something easy to do, and when you're in a rural setting like yourself, there's limited places to turn around, and most people don't want to turn around their buses anyways. Mm-hmm. Just kind of curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that was right in our backyard. It was incredibly tragic, and I think we have to layer in. We obviously blame the motorists a lot, and I stand on a soapbox with my drivers and remind them that fatalities often happen from the bus itself. So before we get too high in our instep regarding what the motorists are doing, are we minding our P's and Q's, and are we don't own the road, we share the road, and are we managing traffic, not manipulating traffic? And so we have driver behavior. We work really hard on student behavior. No matter, we always tell the kids, we can't control what anybody else does, but we can definitely help you train to know what your protocol is for safety. I am a huge proponent of an adult presence. Nothing keeps a kid safer than an adult being present. So if we can push for parents to be out at the bus stop with students, holding their hands, I always say bad things happen to kids when adults aren't around, when they sneak out of the house and they get into traffic, or they get into a body of water, or they just you see bad things happen to young kids when adults aren't there to help keep them safe. That's a huge soapbox of mine. We need parent presence at bus stops as much as possible.
Also, too, something that I've been noticing over the last several years is the resurgence of school bus attendants or monitors, despite if they're required by a student's IEP. What I'm hearing you say is, in terms of having an adult, it's great to have the parents there to receive and discharge their kids to and from the bus, but someone on board to also help the driver, because that's one of the things I also often hear about in terms of driver satisfaction, is if they have that, the behavior is the number one distraction from the students, not necessarily even the other people on the road. So I'm just curious, do you utilize attendance beyond what might be required in an IEP, or is that something maybe you're looking at doing or not?
We do have that extra monitor on all of our special ed buses, our preschool bus. The byproduct of having super subs, that's just what we call them, is that they're on the bus a lot learning routes, so that other person is on board. And we do see that does help. It also allows occasionally for that driver to drive and allow the regular driver to sit, and give more training to the new driver. They get to spend more time with their kids. They can build relationships, which we talk a lot about. When you build a relationship with students, when the time comes and you have to discipline, maybe that relationship will help ease the discipline process. So yeah, I do think that monitors would be helpful, obviously, across the board. That group of people would need intense training, because now you're in a closed space and you're not in a seated belted position. And when kids do as kids might do, you definitely have to train on behavioral modification, lots of good tools in the tool belt for a person that would be on board, really in close proximity to students, and make sure that anywhere from the CPI model or a TBRI model, or just making sure that we're interacting with the kids on a healthy manner. We're not putting ourselves in even more risk liability-wise.
And last but certainly not least, the most recent EPA Clean School Bus rebate program is now open. The applications are being received through January 9th. I know that you have a lot of propane school buses, but I'm asking everybody, in light of the electric push, and I know some districts have electric school buses in Indiana, not a lot, but there are some. And, also too, with what we're seeing in terms of EPA really prioritizing funding electric school buses. 98%, I think, of the awards so far, 8,500 buses or something like that, have been electric. But there's a lot of propane out there, and propane works very well. Mm-hmm. But there's limited options for propane. There's only one available on the market, and we're seeing other things going on with diesel engines and diesel engine availability moving forward. Curious, where does Wa-Nee fall in terms of electric school buses? I know you don't have any yet, but are you looking at those, and are you continuing on and looking to increase your propane fleet?
Yeah, we've been very happy with our transition to propane, saving lots of dollars in maintenance and fuel costs. The Bluebird model is great. That Roush engine is excellent. It was a seamless transition for our mechanics. Our drivers love them. do not intend to look at electric. Northern Indiana has its own challenges when it comes to an electric vehicle and our temperatures. Our rural community is, like I said, 247 square miles. We travel probably 40 to 50,000 miles a year in extracurricular. Range might become a problem with an electric vehicle. I would be curious as I watch this over the years to see if electric would be sustainable without federal funding. So let's see how that goes and progress and see what other great inventions people come up to help keep our kids safer.
Absolutely. Well, with the we're essentially halfway through the Clean School Bus program, and I think you're right. Federal, when there's free money, quote unquote, even though it's not paying for the full cost of the vehicle, it's easier, I think, to keep those costs up too. But once that federal funding goes away, then the industry, the market has to reset. And certainly we have a presidential election coming up, and there's differing views on zero emissions going forward. But yeah, I think seeing the level of money that we've seen, I don't know how sustainable that is beyond the current program, but it will definitely be interesting to watch. So thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
Like I said, good friend of STN, and you've spoken at several of our conferences. We got to get you back soon. So
yeah, that's right.
You're doing a great job out there, and congratulations again to you and your entire team and the school district.
Well, thank you
on that top transportation team award.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun. Honestly, full disclosure, I was looking for a survey and I didn't want to write it, and that came across my desk, and I was like, oh, wow, STN just answered my prayers here. And so staff responded incredibly well. And I actually just received the actual results. And it's been really good to look at that, but also say, okay, where are some of the low points so we can do some improvements too? We always need to be improving.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Amy. It's great seeing you.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
A special thanks to Amy and Ryan for joining me on the episode this week. Also, special thanks to TransFinder, our sponsor of this episode. Guys, don't forget to visit stnonline.com for all the latest news and analysis on the school transportation industry. Remember to sign up for that TST conference, tstconference.com, and STN EXPO East in Charlotte, North Carolina, March 20th through the 25th, 2025. We have our super early bird registration open now. Save $200. Jump in there early. Grab those savings, guys. Take advantage. If you love this podcast, make sure and subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Share it with your friends in the nation. Get it out there on the street. We'd love you to get it out in the hands of everyone in your department to listen. Every week, we've got a new episode, great content, great information. Nation, we love you. We'll see you next week.